Well, today we're continuing our series, and if you're just joining us, what we've been doing is we have been looking at some of the shocking statements, some of the statements that Jesus makes in the Bible that when you read them and you see them the very first time, or the second time, or the third time, or the fourth time, however many times it is, it kind of knocks you a little bit off kilter. Because there's certain understandings and teachings that we often hold to with regards to Jesus, and then we hear other things being said, and it can take us back a little bit. And of the many things that I've been learning as I have been kind of working through this series, one of the things I realize is the incredible value that shock statements have when wanting to teach a greater truth. I mean, it can go too far, it can go over the top. If someone is always saying things that are ridiculous and are always going for the shock value, they kind of lose their voice after time. If it's always shocking, you kind of tune them out over a little while. But Jesus doesn't do that. There's on very specific situations at very specific times where Jesus says things that seem so over the top that you have to stop and think about it. And what I've noticed is that in all of these statements that Jesus has used, it always, in my estimation, falls into the very same category, the very same teaching that I believe Jesus is over and over and over trying people to grasp and hold on to. And it's in regards to faith. It's in regards to belief. It's in regards to what it looks like to truly follow Him. The idea that faith are not just simply statements that we believe in, but rather a life that is lived. That faith is more than just belief, it is behavior. It is a reality that is seen lived out in the midst of all of life. And so Jesus says many things that can oftentimes seem rather outrageous and over the top, but always begging the question, do you take your life lived with me seriously? Do you take it in a way that you are not willing to simply say, yes, Jesus, I believe in you and I believe in what you've said, but rather I'm going to allow this to impact and shape the way in which I live. And so today's statement falls into that category again. And of all the statements, I would say personally, this has been the most shocking to me. It may not be to you, but it's the most shocking to me. Because this is a statement that for me really is about where the rubber meets the road. And so I want to invite Jill to come up and just share these words of Jesus.
Our reading is Luke 14, 25 to 33. Hear the word of the Lord. Large crowds were traveling with Jesus, and turning to them, he said, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, his wife and children, his brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. And anyone who does not carry his cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. Suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Will he not first sit down and estimate the cost to see if he has enough money to complete it? For if he lays the foundation and is not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule him, saying, 'This fellow began to build and was not able to finish.' Or suppose a king is about to go to war against another king. Will he not first sit down and consider whether he is able with 10,000 men to oppose the one coming against him with 20,000? If he is not able, he will send a delegation, while the other is still a long way off, and will ask for terms of peace. In the same way, any of you who does not give up everything he has cannot be my disciple." The word of the Lord.
And so the statement I want to kind of focus on here this morning, we'll just pull it back up on the screen, is when Jesus says, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father, mother, wife, and children, his brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. And to that, I say, welcome to our Family Day service. I'm sure you're glad you got out of bed for that, right? It seems rather shocking. It seems rather over the top when here we are on a weekend where we celebrate families, on a weekend where we celebrate the significance of those people in our lives. We have Valentine's Day. We read these words of Jesus, which stop you in your tracks. Which seems to be a contradiction to all the other things that Jesus talks about. I mean, there's many places we could go. You could go first to the Ten Commandments that it says in there, honor your father and mother. Okay, Jesus, I'm trying to follow you on this. Or when Jesus is asked very specifically by a very smart person one day, Jesus, there's a lot of commands in the Bible. There's a lot of laws in the Bible. What is the most important one? And Jesus, on the tail end of it, says, the second greatest thing you can do is to love your neighbor as yourself. You see throughout the teachings of the Bible, you see throughout the reality of the early church, the value that was placed upon family, the value that was placed upon relationships. And so what is Jesus saying? It can be a very unpopular statement. And it's interesting to notice the context. The very first verses that was read by Jill tells us that at this point in time, there were very large crowds following Jesus. People were clearly intrigued and wanting to follow and wanting to learn more. And then Jesus says that noticing the large crowds, he then turns to them and says these words. It's almost as if it was like Purge Sunday. It was like a purge message of, you know what, we gotta thin the ranks a little bit here. So I'm just going to say something so over the top. And I think it works because the very last verses that we didn't get to here this morning says, and as Jesus continued to teach, now the tax collectors and sinners were really the only ones gathering around. I mean, everyone else was kind of like, I am getting the heck out of Dodge. Like, Jesus, hate my family, hate my mother, hate my brother, hate my wife, hate my children. Jesus, what are you talking about? What are you saying? But this verse in and of itself on its own can absolutely create challenges. But as you begin to piece together all the other things that Jesus was talking about, hopefully begins to give a bit of a clearer perspective, a bit of a broader view. Because Jesus must have been talking about this in other places, because Matthew, who was another one of Jesus' followers, who wrote another one of the Gospels, commented on this in his Gospel as well. But he toned it down a little bit. He says, his words, were anyone who loves his mother or father more than me is not worthy of me. And so you kind of see where Jesus is going. He's not using hate in the sense of you must hate them, but he's using the art of comparison. That Jesus is saying, in comparison to your love of me, your love of anyone else, those who are most significant in your life should pale in comparison. There should be absolutely nothing that shows your love as much as your love for me, if you truly want to be my follower. It's as if Jesus is taking a step back and saying, I understand that you're wanting to follow me, but do you understand what it is that I'm asking of you? The significance of the life that I am calling you to. Now, one of the dangers is that after reading this and having a better understanding, you can step away and say, okay, all right, I get what you're saying, Jesus. I need to love you in an incredible way. I get that. But I think Jesus says these words, again, to get us out of the place of just simply understanding that faith in him is not just about belief, not just about holding to statements, but rather Jesus asking us, do you see this reality lived out in your life? And one of the great ways to see what is important in life is actually doing the art of comparison. You know, there's certain things that you like a little bit in your life, but then there's other things that you like even more. And so when pitted one against the other, you can start to see, okay, what is of greater value in my life? Does that make sense? Right? And so when you're comparing things, it's unfair to compare something you don't really like to something you really like, because that's just not fair. And so what is Jesus doing? He is saying, take the people who you love the most in your life. And what does that look like when matched up in comparison to your love for me? Comparing things is a great way to see where someone truly values something more than the other. And I've done this recently. I'll do this oftentimes with our kids, but most specifically with Canaan. There's many things that Canaan loves. He loves candy. He loves Lego. He loves playing soccer. He loves going to the dollar store and buying toys that break 30 seconds later. He loves those types of things, but he truly, truly loves fishing. This kid, there's a picture, his first fish, I don't see if you can see it there. That's the first fish he ever caught. You can see the huge smile on his face. That's in the lagoon in Toronto with Beck's dad. But Canaan loves fishing so much, and I'm glad that it's just kind of a summer sport. He hasn't clued into the fact that you can actually fish in the winter. And so any of you who share that with him will be in the hut with me as well. I'm just saying that right off the hop. But it's always an interesting comparison, because you can oh, now I see he's in the church this morning. Oh, great. Shoot. I'm going to go home and get a sweater. But you can have a conversation. And I'll often say to Canaan, Canaan, what would you rather do? Would you rather play soccer or go fishing? Go fishing. Would you rather play Lego or go fishing? Go fishing. Would you rather go and eat candy at the dollar store or go fishing? And amazingly, to his brother and sister, he says fishing. He loved it so much that when he had show and share in grade 1, I remember it's show and tell, but it's show and share now, he brought an actual fishing bobber to school. One of those plastic bobbers, red and white. He just absolutely loves fishing. And so it doesn't mean he doesn't like Lego. It doesn't mean he doesn't like candy. It doesn't mean he doesn't like playing soccer. But if given the choice, he loves fishing. Except something's changed this year. He's found a new love. And it's a love of hockey. All things hockey. Now, if you were to ask Canaan, would you rather go fish? I'll ask him here. Canaan, would you rather go fishing or play hockey? What would you rather do? Don't mess this up for me here. Hockey, there you go, there you go. He's not making a liar out of me here this morning. I was getting nervous. He loves hockey, and I know he loves hockey, not just based on the things that he talks about, but you see the reality in his life. I mean, he has pictures, unfortunately, of the Toronto Maple Leafs in his bedroom. Right? He loves to wear his hockey jersey. He loves to go and play hockey. I mean, if you know where we live, we have the outdoor rink right next to him. And he spends all of his time on the outdoor rink. It's amazing. Monday to Friday, it's next to impossible to get him out of bed to go to school, which is typical behavior of someone in grade 1, I'm sure. But Saturday morning, when he has an early morning hockey practice, he's the one poking me in the side of the face to get me up out of bed in order to take him to go. Like, he just absolutely loves it. And you know that he loves it, not by simply just what he says, but in the actions in his life. And even when you take things that he enjoys doing, things that he loves doing, it pales in comparison when matched up to what he really loves. And as I thought more and more about that, as I thought more and more about what Jesus is saying in this passage, for me, this is where it hits home. Because there's many things that I like in this world. Many things that I enjoy doing and I love doing. But when matched up to my love of family, there's no comparison. And I'm sure the same would ring true for you. I'm sure the statement that we make, there's nothing I wouldn't do for my family, are not just words that we say, but it's a reality that we live out. And when I say that I love my family and there's nothing else in this world that would compare to my family, it's not just simply words I speak, but it's a reality that is seen in my life. In terms of the time invested in family is far greater than anything else. Money spent, resources used. Again, family wins. The actions that I make, whenever I make a decision, there's lots of decisions that I make and lots of different factors that go into it, but on significant decisions, it's not as if I just kind of ignore the family, ignore Rebecca and the kids and say, well, I'm making this decision and this is the direction that we're going. No, we are a part of this conversation because I realize that this is important. Family is important. And the list could go on and on. But I think my love is defined best by the reality of commitment. That there's good times, there's hard times, there's confusing times, there's moments of uncertainty, but through it all, my love is defined by my commitment to stay with family, to always put the needs of the family at the top of the list. And so when I hear these words of Jesus, it hits close to home. I'm asked to take a step back and to say, Joel, as great as your love is for your family, as great as your love should be for your family, how does it measure up? How does it compare honestly to your love for me? And so as I begin to think about that more and more, I begin to ask myself, the same way in which I love my family, am I actively loving God in the same way? In terms of the time that I pour into my family, do I see the importance of time with God as well? In terms of the resources and the money and the other things, how does that compare? And I start to see that the reality of the rubber truly meeting the road when I think of decisions. In the same way that I would include my family in on any important decision, does God get a say in that? In terms of the level of trust and intimacy and vulnerability that I show to my family and very few others. Because my family will know me better than anyone else. Do I have that same type, that same dynamic in my relationship with God? When I think of my commitment to my family, the commitment to stay in the relationship regardless of what happens, through the good, through the challenging, through moments of uncertainty, can I honestly say the same about my faith in Jesus? To not simply show love and appreciation and trust when everything's going well, but in those challenging, hard moments, where it may almost seem as if God is distant, where God is maybe not responding in the way that I had hoped or honestly in the way that I had expected, is my level of commitment the same? Because when I think of when Jesus was asked the question, when Jesus was asked of all the commandments, of all the laws, of everything that you've asked us to do, what is the most important? Jesus says, love God with everything you've got. Love others as yourself. But understand the priority. And so when I read these words of Jesus, I take a step back and begin to say, am I truly loving God in ways that indicate that God and Jesus is more than someone I simply like, someone I simply respect and honor and give portions of my life? Or is he the one that when put on a scale of comparison to anything else, clearly rises to the top? Because even if I love God in the very same way that I love my family, it makes it equal. And so as I further begin to think about this and wrestle with this and struggle with this, the second place I find myself going to is not only do I love God in the same way that I love my family in tangible, practical, everyday experiences, but as a family, do we make sacrifices for him? Because one of the ultimate expressions of love is the willingness to sacrifice. We see it in any significant relationship. We see it in marriage. We see it in parenting. We see it as the willingness to sacrifice for the sake and the benefit of another because of your love. And that's really what Jesus is saying. As the crowds are following him, as the crowds are just loving what he is saying, he stops and takes a moment and says, have you considered what it is that I am asking of you? And so a conversation that Rebecca and I have comes back to this place of, as a family, how are we sometimes sacrificing the comfort, the ease, the choices and the desires that maybe we would want to make for you, to truly show our commitment and love of God? And this isn't like a one-time sort of thing where it's like, wow, we did this last week or we did this yesterday. And so one of the things that as parents we are trying to teach our kids in practical ways is to understand that as a family, that our love and our commitment is not only for one another, but it's ultimately to be seen in serving God. I'm not sure there's any easy takeaway here this morning. I'm not sure this is one of those moments when you go away and you say, yes, this is necessarily my next step. But it's a place to ponder. It's a place to consider. It's a place to maybe step back and begin to say, what does this comparison look like? Because perhaps you're here this morning and you're just exploring faith. You're wanting to know more about Jesus and who he is and what he desires. And you hear these words and think, really? There is no way. Do I really want to make that level of commitment and promise? And at a certain level, I can understand that. Except for this one reality that I have experienced and I continue to learn, is that Jesus is worth it. He's worth it. And you don't start figuring this out until faith becomes more than a statement of belief and becomes a reality that is lived. Because as much as I struggle with this in my own life, what I begin to realize more and more and more, the greater my love for Jesus, the greater my love for my family. The greater father I become, the greater dad I become, hopefully the greater son I become. Jesus wants that which is best for us in all of life. And so he's encouraging us that when we make our focus upon him, it doesn't diminish our love for others. It actually increases it. But Jesus is saying, you need to make me the first, the greatest priority in all of life, in everything. And so I want to encourage you today that as you hear these challenging words, to begin to consider in your life, how can I love God in every moment of every day, so that it becomes a reality, not simply a checklist that we go through, but truly a relationship that is lived. Because God wants nothing but our all. Nothing but everything that we can give. It doesn't mean that there's great things in life. It doesn't mean that there's not things that we love and we like and we enjoy doing. But how does it compare when put side by side to your love for him? Please stand with me as we sing together.